Nvidia may be stopping one GPU from production, at least heavy production, because this is going to force you to buy another GPU. You're saying you can't force somebody to buy something that's a luxury product? Not for everybody. What if you need it for work? What if perhaps your PC is getting old and you have no other choice and you just happen to have a budget for this particular GPU? But look, what Nvidia does is going to affect you buying the better product. The GPU that I'm talking about here is the RTX 4090. You may be saying, well, you were never going to spend $1,600+ anyway, and aren't they out of stock? No, that's the kicker here. The reason why Nvidia may reduce dramatically the production of these GPUs, as reported by Moore's Law is Dead, he was talking about this on his other video as well, is because that GPU was like how we were taking a look at the GPU shortage in 2023. If it's in stock, it means that things are getting better, because before, when it came out, scalpers were buying this GPU. You could not buy an RTX 4090, and that meant that at least a little bit of that previous GPU shortage was still happening. Now, the only difference is it's more of an artificial shortage. In the case of the 4090, a lot of people did buy it because it had really good price to performance, and that's going to leave other GPUs such as the RTX 4080 and the 4070 Ti looking really bad in comparison. If you like staying up to date on GPU news and computer hardware, remember to subscribe. So if you're Nvidia, what do? Picture this. You walk into a store or you check on Newegg and there are a bunch of MSRP 4090s in stock. Let's say $1,600, the MSRP. And then you have a bunch of 4080s that are maybe not MSRP, maybe the ones that are like $1,399 or $1,400. They definitely do exist and they're out there in pretty good numbers. What are you going to do? Buy a 4080, which has had terrible reviews basically for its price to performance. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. Or up your budget another few $100s and get what pretty much is like the king of GPUs at this point, the RTX 4090. Of course, most people that have that budget are going to do that. That's why it makes sense for Nvidia to restrict production of the 4090, therefore forcing your hand into having to buy a 4080. This is actually a pretty common tactic. Even AMD does it. Let's say if you walk into a store or you go online and you wanted even the AMD 7900X TX and you know you need a GPU that day. If that one is sold out, which was the one you really wanted because the price to performance is great, but then what are you going to do? Go home empty-handed? Yes, some people have the resiliency or the situation to be able to do that, but what if you needed a GPU? You may look at the in-stock 7900XT, for example, which doesn't have that great price to performance, and you're going to be forced, quote unquote, to buy that one instead of the one you really wanted. So if AMD stocked the 7900XTX, they would never sell the 7900XT because it just doesn't make any sense at that price. That's the GPU that AMD is really focusing on for raising the price. They know they're going to sell a lot of 7900XTX at $999. What they wanted to do is bring the like 7800XT, the 6800XT, if that makes sense, instead of making it a 7800XT, make it a 7900XT, but without people noticing nearly as much, jack up the price to $899. So Nvidia is doing practically the same thing. Of course, you're going to want a 4090 if you're spending that much money. If you don't see it in stock, however, for a long time and they're sold out like they have been, that's how Nvidia is going to get you to buy 4080s. And you can bet if a lot of people started to buy 4080s and they flew off the shelves, they would do the same thing to that GPU, not to cannibalize the sales of the 4070 Ti, which is another GPU that's also struggling. So what does that mean? Well, this year it's going to be kind of funny for GPUs. Even though the shortage is definitely over, there is an artificial shortage that could go on here. Nvidia Nvidia could hold back inventory and stock. They could basically just not sell to retailers these GPUs, and that way they can clear inventory of stuff that they know is a much harder sell. They'd rather do that than lower prices. These companies, as we've seen, it's very hard for them to try to discount these GPUs after they've already announced them, after they've already been on board with selling them at a particular price. Even when Nvidia switched from the 4080 12GB to the 4070 Ti, that was certainly an unusual move, and even that only brought a $100 price decrease, which in many people's opinion is still not enough. I think before Nvidia and the third-party AIBs really start to discount GPUs and drop the prices even further, the first step is going to be to limit the amount that are out there to keep the prices high. Remember, AMD did a very similar thing as well. Remember the reports a few weeks ago that they were limiting CPU and GPU supply in order to not have too many go into the supply chain, and sales are down now, so there's a lot of understandable factors that these companies are doing, but one thing that it causes is an artificial shortage, therefore keeping these prices high. So Nvidia can't raise the price of the 4090 out of nowhere unless they introduce a new model or something like that, and people aren't really buying it in that heavy of numbers. So most likely the best option that they can do is to restrict that GPU, and that way hopefully it will push people towards the 4080. Hopefully, at least from Nvidia's viewpoint. In our viewpoint, not too good, because if you wanted a 4090, you should be able to find one, as we've been finding it the last few weeks, and the 4080 needs a price cut. It's not competitive at $1199, and everything else below it, like the 4070 Ti, definitely not competitive either, and we're going to see even worse pricing most likely with the 4070 and the 4060. Those are GPUs that really hit home for most of the mainstream market. Most people aren't worried about the 4090, even though it's going to affect them in one way or another, because that high pricing is pushing pricing of every other GPU, from the 4060 all the way down to the used GPUs on the market like a 3060 or 3070. Everything is affected by the overall GPU pricing. So if by now you still think you want a 4090 and you happen to see them in stock, there's a good chance prices may not really go down for them, because Nvidia is going to artificially limit them. You might as well get one until the prices stabilize more, and that may be at least next year, because it seems like this year they're definitely playing along the lines of being safe, and that means not reducing prices too much and not releasing too much inventory out in the wild. Everything else, like the 4080, they may wait a little bit before reducing prices to see if constraining 4090 supply is going to affect sales of 4080s. But judging by the amount that these are definitely not moving, I think eventually they're going to have to lower prices anyway, because the 4080 just ended up being really unpopular for that particular price. And same thing for the 4070 Ti. So we have to keep an eye on what's going on with these artificial constraints for these GPUs, because it's going to affect pricing everywhere. So Nvidia definitely is a little bit upset right now that their main GPU that was selling so well, the 4090, even though it's an expensive GPU, it sells in pretty heavy numbers if you consider the price. Of course, more people will buy like a 60 class GPU, but the amount of people the last few years that have been buying high-end GPUs have gone up a considerable amount, so it's definitely making a much bigger dent than it used to before. It's not like they release a 4090 and maybe a couple people in a town buy it. Now it's really spread out a considerable amount, and thousands and thousands of people are buying the most expensive GPUs. Good for Nvidia, but not good for us when they can constrain supply and keep those prices high. And that kind of rhymed. So remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.